Hey, it's Kevin and Taylor from the Kevin and Taylor Show, and we are so excited to be joined by Matthew West.
What's up, everybody?
Yeah, so good to see you.
Looking very tan. You're looking good.
The summertime is
sunburn.
here. I was telling you guys off the air that I have certain days of my week where instead of getting to write a song, I'm doing, like, it's like business day.
Okay.
So I'm in meetings. And so when the weather gets nice, so yesterday I had this idea. I was like, I'm going to do backyard business. And so I turned all the video off on my Zoom calls and I walked circles
laps.
in my backyard. I got like 17,000 steps in and crushed my business
fried
day.
your face.
And then I walked inside and my wife was like, have you ever heard of sunscreen? So it was kind of a failed experiment, but maybe I'm onto something. Backyard
I think you are.
business.
Backyard business. And maybe
you
you'll
kn-
get some song ideas.
Next
Yeah,
time you
you
should
never
come to
know.
my house and we'll just do this interview while we walk laps in the
Yes,
backyard.
I like
Okay.
that.
We
We'll
can all
burn,
get tan.
get our close our
Right.
rings, get some stuff. Do you know that one of our favorite Matthew West stories? You were a bachelor, hadn't even met your wife yet.
Okay.
We ran into you at a coffee
The
shop.
bad old days.
The bad old
Bad old days.
That's
And we
right.
ran into you in a coffee shop, and you just hung out with us. You were still writing songs
Back
at
in
that
the
point
day.
only.
Yeah, I was just getting started.
And it was so fun.
That's
we had a
how far
blast.
back we go.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
been
And
a
it's
long
always
time.
good to
I
be
think
with
you had just
guys.
gotten your driver's license. Right?
I'm a little older than that, I think. But I'm still learning how to drive, if you ask my wife.
Oh, ouch.
And then I try to like tell her, like, no, you're the worst driver. And then she's like, let's see who's been in more wrecks. You know what I mean? And so I got in a wreck a
Yes.
couple weeks ago.
I was just going to ask you that. We're
Was
lucky
it-
you're here,
I'm
right?
okay.
Your fault?
Well, it was the rain's fault. I'm gonna blame it on the rain because my car like hydroplaned, which I would always watch that video in driver's ed, but it's never happened to me where you like
Right.
literally lose control of the car.
Yeah.
But once my wife found out that I was okay, she quickly pivoted to see, like, I am a better driver.
I told you need
Yeah.
to slow down.
So it was-
You always go way too fast in the rain.
There was a moment of concern for my safety, and then it
And
was a
then-
quick pivot to
That's
I rest. my
Have you ever had
Yes.
the conversation with your wife where you sarcastically go, it's a miracle that my car is just not completely totaled all the time without you with me?
That's exactly. How could I do it without you telling me where to turn and where to go?
That's it.
I think it goes both ways.
So when we met you that day, you were a young songwriter. Now, you have so many songs of your own, but songs you've written for other people too. What's it like when someone else records one of your songs and it's a hit? Do you have a different emotional attachment to that song, or are you like, yes?
I find it to be somebody asked me, like, do you ever like wish you would have kept that song?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know that that's ever really happened. I mean, like, because sometimes it'd be, well, if it became a hit, like, should I have kept that for myself?
Yeah,
But I'll
yeah.
tell you, when I'm writing a song for another artist or with another artist, my mindset is so far removed from my own record or my own artist ministry and platform because
Okay.
my role, it's like, I'm at a different seat on the couch, if you will. I'm at a different seat at the table.
Okay.
And my whole mission in that room is what's their story? What is it that they feel called to communicate to the world? And so, like, a perfect example of that would be the first one that comes to mind is a song I wrote with Mike Weaver from Big Daddy Weave. And it was a song called Heaven Changes Everything.
Oh yeah, great.
And that
Yeah.
day we wrote together and we were talking, and Mike started to unpack the story about the loss of his brother. And we started to talk about heaven. And next thing we know, there's 3 grown men crying in the room. And we write this song. And it's like, that was never my song. I was
Yeah.
a part of that song. And that song is a part of me.
Yeah.
And when I sing it, I think of specific parts of my story. That's Mike's song.
Yeah.
And so when that went number 1, it was like this celebration of like all that God's done to bring beauty from ashes out of that story. So that's a good example
Yeah.
of like, so I get excited. I love songwriting. I love
Well, and
songwriting.
you've done that with your fans. You got their stories years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And for people who've been a Matthew West fan for life, they know this. Like, you told their stories in songs.
It's one of the great joys of my life. And all these years later, I still do it. So on every record that I make, somebody's story I like to think now it's like, I made a couple records where every song was inspired by somebody's story who listens to your station, who listens to my music, but they've never written a song, but they have a story to tell.
Yeah.
And that's been a big part of my whole platform is like, I've always felt like here, it's just like you guys, we all have microphone, like we get the job where we have a microphone in our hands, but somebody else might go, well, I don't have as much influence, or my story doesn't count as much
Right.
because I'm not the one in front of a camera or a mic. And so I feel like my whole career's been about like going out and getting the crowd and saying, come with me. Your story has just as much value as anybody
love
else's
that.
because God made it and He's writing it. So,
Yeah.
I still collect people's stories. And one of the coolest things of my whole career, ever since I had that idea several years ago, people come up to me at my concerts every single night, and they, without saying a word, they place an envelope in my hand, and they like kind of look at me like, you know what this is? I go, and I take it and I read it. And when I read it, it's like
They trust you
They're
with their
trusting-
story.
they're trusting, and not just with any part of their story, but a lot of times it's, here's my wound, here's my brokenness, here's what I've gone through, and here's how you helped me. It's
Yeah.
like, oh,
What an honor.
That's incredible.
That makes it
That's
all
gotta
worth
feel
it.
great.
All the
Well,
long hours.
Part of your
everything.
story is not just being a dad, but you're a girl dad. So what's it like being surrounded by all that estrogen at the West House?
I joked that's why I wrote this song, Don't Stop Praying. Because I'm like seeing these boys come on, like that's the inspiration for the song. It's been, I joke though, because it's been like the best part of life is like getting to be a dad. I thought I was going to have boys. Like when my wife and I got married and a few years later we started having kids, I grew up in a house of all boys except for my mom, 2 brothers. And so that's what I knew. So I was like, well, the Lord's going to, get me my sweet spot. I know how to play baseball. I can do all that. And instead, 2 daughters came along, and it's been the most incredible. I think having daughters has calmed me down a little bit too, because I remember even when they were little, I realized even if I started to raise my voice, even just the potential of them being in trouble, my oldest would just start crying, and I couldn't even get mad. I'd be like, it's like, oh, this kind of calms me down a little.
All of a sudden, you're Tom Hanks
Exactly.
in a game of their own. No, there's no crying.
There's no crying in baseball.
Okay.
So it's been fun. I mean, being a parent has stretched me. It's grown me. I like to think that when I got married, it was the first realization of how selfish I can be, because it was like, oh, it's not about me. And then when we had kids, I was like, oh, it's really not about me. And now I have 3 women in my house, and they go get their nails done, and I sit at the house by myself, and I go, it's really not about me, until they need my credit card.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you were talking earlier about writing other people's stories.
Yeah.
But a song that is very personal to you and it relates to your daughters is 18 Summers.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Lulu just graduated high school.
She just graduated. My oldest daughter just
How did that
graduated.
happen?
I mean, where does the time go? It's like you just talked about, we met many years ago at a coffee shop. It's like all these years later, I'm going to be sending a daughter off to college. And man, it was a bittersweet weekend of celebrating her and also just holding my wife. And I got to say, my wife, I went into our bathroom, and right on the sink yesterday, there was a letter to me. And it was from my wife. And she wrote a letter to me, telling me how good of a job I did as a dad. And I don't know if she knew, but in my head, I was really struggling with thoughts of I don't know, something about graduating where I was like, did I do a good enough job? I did, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me personally, I'm not saying oh, I feel sorry for myself, but I've traveled so much in my life and in my child's life. I've been on the road touring. And so there's those you just, sometimes you feel guilty. You're like, oh, if I count the days that I missed time with them. And she just wrote this letter that the Lord used her to speak straight to the heart of feelings that I was just feeling, and going
That's
okay,
beautiful.
take a deep breath. I'm sure I'm going to send my kid to counseling for one reason or another, but I'm just thankful.
Might as well be me.
Yeah, exactly.
And real quick, you got to tell a story, because so many women I know, and your wife Emily's going through this. It's hard on the mom too.
Oh yeah.
And she called you one day on the phone, and she was crying.
Yeah.
And you got to tell that story.
She called me. She was like, I'm like, are you crying? She's like, yeah. I'm like, why are you crying? And this was 2 months before graduation. We didn't see the cap and gown yet.
Right.
She's like, I just drove by a soccer field and there's kids playing soccer. And I'm like, well, our daughter didn't play soccer. And she's like, yeah, but she could have. And that could have been her. And I was like, what are we? That's when I realized.
I could have been the staff.
It's going to be a long
That's
road.
when it hit me that it's going to be a long journey, of an emotional roller coaster, if you will.
Totally.
But
I mean, I'll warn you guys, my sister's daughter just went to college 2 years ago, And she still has trouble saying goodbye. And her younger daughter bought, because it's just like you guys, 2 girls, but they're 3 years apart. The younger daughter bought her older sister's perfume. And she's like,
She's here.
she's here.
Oh my gosh.
no, it's-
Come on.
So just to warn you, it's hard. It stays hard.
So my daughter chose a school that's just a few hours from where we live. And I wanted her to choose a school that was right in Nashville where we live, but she's like, that's a little too close. So I said, fair enough. But I've been joking with her. I'm like, okay, I've already mapped out the route to get to you. If I leave at this time in the morning, I could be there with a coffee for you right before your first class. And then I'll wait outside the classroom like Buddy the Elf. And then she's like, Dad, this is not happening.
Right. That's your dream, Dad. Not my, it's my nightmare.
So cute.
Exactly. But, so we're working through that. And obviously the way that I work through those different chapters of my story, like if anybody's listening to my music for any amount of time, whether I'm writing somebody else's story or, writing my story, is my songs are like I don't scrapbook, but it's like,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's an audio scrapbook. And so
Yeah.
like I just released a song called 18 Summers that was like, it's literally the chapter that I'm in right now as a dad, and just going 18 summers gone like that, 18 years, you don't get back. And when I sing it, I can't sing it without crying.
it's so
I'm supposed to
hard.
sing at the Grand Ole Opry and play the song, and I'm like, I'm going to start crying on stage at the Grand Ole Opry, but this is what it's about.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you want to feel all the feelings, and like, that's what living is.
Yes.
It's like, I think a lot of guys are like, I was talking to another dad at graduation, and I'm like, how you doing? He's got sunglasses. He's like, I'm just pushing it way down deep. Pushing it.
Should have given him a copy of your song. No, you're not.
I was like, listen to this, buddy. So I try not to push it down.
All right, well, we're going to have you do that song for us in a minute. Can
Okay.
you do that song for
I'd
us
be
in a
happy
minute?
to.
So Matthew West is going to do 18 Summers for us in a sec. Real quick before we do that, a little rapid fire.
Let's go.
So this is not long answers. It's just either or.
I'm not good at short answers.
Which would you rather do? Sing the national anthem at a Cubs game or Daytona 500?
Holy cow, it's crazy. I've already done the first one.
Oh, you've done the Cubs
Yes,
game.
so
then Daytona
Yes.
by default.
Okay.
Well, but then I did the Firecracker 400. So I've done both. Done them both.
Which
All right,
one
I'd
was
say
the
baseball.
pinnacle?
Done that.
Wrigley Field, because I
Go
grew up
baseball.
going to a
Yeah.
Cubs game.
Okay, yeah, I went to Cubs games when I was a little girl too. Okay, so next one. Eat dinner, just you and your wife, Emily, on top of the Eiffel Tower, or a campfire in the basin of the Grand Canyon.
Oh, man. I'm going to go Eiffel Tower, because that
Ooh.
seems like super romantic and maybe less bugs. So let's do that.
All right, last one, Mr. Songwriter. Who would you rather write a song with? Willie Nelson.
I'm picturing that room already. That smoke-filled room. Okay.
Willie Nelson or Taylor Swift?
Oh gosh. My daughters maybe would pick Taylor Swift. I'm gonna pick Willie, provided it's a smoke-free environment. And maybe try to write it on the road again,
Right.
like some classic country song.
I think Willie would probably say, that's all right, I'll bring gummies.
I've heard stories. I've heard incredible stories about Willie Nelson being high as a kite and still going for a 4-mile run, and I'm like, that's a very interesting.
But the key is,
Wow.
he thought it was a 2-mile run. That's how he went
Maybe
before.
that's what it was. There you go. So maybe me and Willie had read it.
And before we wrap it up, Matthew, what can we watch for next? I mean, you're songwriter, you're managing Ann Wilson. You've got so much going on. What should you got a little sneak peek for us on what's next?
Well, one of the things I love doing is I love writing books too. And so earlier this year, I released a 30-day devotional called My Story, Your Glory. We're talking about stories.
Yeah.
And then later this fall, I'm releasing a Christmas book called Come
cool.
Home for Christmas. So those are some
Nice.
fun things. And then I'm also working on some different film things right now. So my wife says I have a hard time sitting still. This is probably the longest anybody's, that's how good you guys are at interviewing.
We had to put you on a couch and get you a
Lock
pillow to
me in.
grasp.
But I'm always, every day is a new adventure. Like today I get to
awesome.
talk to you. Tomorrow I'm writing a song. The next day I'm working on a
Nice.
book idea. So working on a book idea for Don't Stop Praying as well. That's a message that seems to be really resonating with people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, one thing we know for sure is that everybody's got at least one part of their story that ain't quite put together the way they want it to yet. And,
yeah.
Right.
and so it's an encouragement just to figure out. I feel like I've gotten really good at talking about God in my career. And I wrote Don't Stop Praying because I thought, like, I don't want to be better at talking about God than talking to him. And so that song is a personal reminder for me to go, like, hey, don't miss time with Jesus today. So anyways, I'm always working on new stuff and working on my tan, of course.
Yeah, of course. Of course. All right. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks,
West.
guys.
Yeah,
All right.
thank
You guys are
So
awesome.
fun.
1, we didn't sleep at all. 2 was footsteps down the hall. 3, you jump into me in the pool. 4 was princess dressing up. 5 was tea in plastic cups. 6, you got your backpack off to school. Can't believe how fast it flies. They always say don't blink, and now I know why. 18 summers gone like that. 18 years you don't get back. 18 trips around the sun. Don't it make you wonder why holding time's like holding sand, always slipping through my hands? What I'd give to hold you for another 18 summers. Well, 7 was the Disney trip. 8 was singing Taylor Swift. 9 was bedtime prayers and saying, Jesus, I believe. 10, 11, like a weed you grew. 12, 13, well, middle school. 14, high school's coming, and you're way too cool for me. Can't believe how fast it flies. 18 summers gone like that. 18 years you don't get back. 18 trips around the sun. Don't it make you wonder why holding time's like holding sand, always slipping through my hands? And what I'd give to hold you for another 18 summers. Oh, 18 summers. 15, first boy broke your heart. 16, driving daddy's car. 17, you're wild and free, and I'm waiting up for you. And there you stood, cap and gown, and I'm smiling as I think about how everyone before us what led us to. Dorm room number 205, a grown man trying not to cry. Can't wait to see all you're gonna do. Your mom and me and 2 aching hearts, driving home in an empty car, thanking God for the gift of raising you for 18 summers.